One night during our honeymoon, I suddenly woke up to overhear my husband engaged in a secretive and disturbing phone conversation. Trembling with anxiety, I carefully peered at his phone and discovered something shocking. Realizing the gravity of the situation, I took his passport, packed my things, and flew back to New York alone, planning my next move against him. Upon my return, I was approached by a mysterious individual. "My name is Kate," she introduced herself. "I work at an office in New York. I met your husband through a mutual friend. After a few dinners and realizing our chemistry, we married following a year of dating. Yuan is handsome and kind-hearted, but there was something that had been troubling me. My concern began as our wedding approached. Normally, Yuan came home later than I did, but one day when my overtime extended and I returned late, something felt off. I noticed a pair of women's shoes next to Yuan's work shoes, shoes that didn't belong to me. Suspicion grew as I overheard a conversation between a man and a woman. Though I couldn't catch all of it, Yuan's unmistakable voice and the woman's cheerful tone fueled my worries. I quickly activated the video function on my smartphone and entered the living room, only to find Yuan and my mother-in-law there. "Oh, you're back. Welcome home, Kate," Yuan said, his tone apologetic. I was relieved to see my suspicions about infidelity were unfounded, but then another surprise awaited me. The room was filled with stacked cardboard boxes. Confused, I asked, "What's with all these boxes? What's going on?" "We're packing for a move," Yuan explained. "Mom is helping." "Moving where?" I asked, my head spinning. "You didn't mention anything about moving." "Oh, I assumed that after getting married, moving into our house was the next step," Yuan's mother said nonchalantly. "I wasn't informed of any plans to live with your parents," I protested. "This sudden change disrupts my vision of our married life. I can't agree to such unilateral decisions." My mother-in-law's response was casual. "Isn't it normal to live together after marriage? If that's an issue, you might as well consider divorce." Her words cut deeply. "It's easier for both of us to live here, especially if you ever need anything. It's a win-win," Yuan added. Feeling cornered between Yuan and his mother, I reluctantly agreed to move into their home. The transition proved incredibly stressful. Yuan's attachment to his mother became even more apparent. He constantly referenced her opinions, and most of the household chores were still managed by her. Whenever I cooked, he'd comment that Mom's cooking tastes better. It seemed my mother-in-law took pleasure in this dynamic, and my father-in-law remained silently observant, never engaging with me. I often felt undervalued in the house. What bothered me most was my mother-in-law's extravagant spending habits. The situation was more challenging than I had anticipated, and the strains on our marriage began to show. I soon realized that my mother-in-law had a penchant for luxury brand items, buying them eagerly whenever a new release caught her eye. Each time a new product was announced, she would ask me, "I want this, but I'm short on money. Can you lend me some?" Although I thought to myself that if she didn't have the money, she shouldn't buy it, I couldn't object since she handled all the housework. As a result, the savings I had accumulated since my student days were dwindling. When I brought this up to my husband, he simply said, "We're allowed to live here, so don't complain." While I didn't actively choose to live in this house, there was a reason I stayed. Deep down, I knew my husband genuinely respected me. On our days off, he always made an effort to spend quality time with me and had even planned our honeymoon in advance. Despite the difficulties of living with his family, his love kept me going. Finally, our much-anticipated honeymoon arrived. We were heading to Italy, a destination I had always dreamed of visiting for its authentic cuisine. My husband had made this dream a reality, and the excitement of traveling abroad with the person I loved most made my heart race. However, our eagerly awaited adventure took a drastic turn one night. Late into the evening, I woke up to use the bathroom and noticed that my husband was not beside me. Assuming he might be up for the same reason, I left the bedroom and overheard him on the phone. Who could he be calling at this hour? As I listened closely, a chilling statement reached my ears. "By this time tomorrow, Kate will be long gone to the afterlife. Don't worry, Mom. I won't mess up. I'll call you later." The voice on the phone seemed to be his mother's, and the implication of what he said about me being in the afterlife sent a shiver down my spine. Fearful that he might notice me, I hurriedly pretended to be asleep. When my husband returned to bed and soon fell into a deep sleep, I quietly took his smartphone and went to the bathroom. His phone wasn't locked, making it easy for me to access. Although I knew snooping was wrong in this potentially life-threatening situation, I felt it was necessary. I couldn't resist the urge to investigate further. I opened his messaging app and read through his conversation with his mother. The messages revealed a chilling plan. He intended to kill me for the insurance money, which his mother would then use to splurge on luxury brands. The blood drained from my face as the horrifying reality sunk in. My husband had always been somewhat of a mama's boy, but I had never imagined he would scheme with his mother like this. In a panic, I took a screenshot of their messages and lay back on the bed, even with my eyes closed. The overwhelming fear made it impossible to sleep. The night dragged on, and when morning arrived, bringing the usual buzz of trains and people starting their day, I knew I had to get out of there. I quickly gathered my belongings, deciding to leave the hotel and head home. As I packed my suitcase, I noticed my husband's passport on the table. A sudden idea struck me. I would leave him stranded abroad. I grabbed the passport and rushed out, heading straight to the airport. Ignoring his numerous calls, I boarded a flight back to New York. Once home, I began preparing for my retaliation. I knew I couldn't return to the house where I lived with his parents, so I found a reasonably priced hotel in New York. I started collecting additional evidence and contacting lawyers. Whenever his parents were out, his mother at her craft class and his father golfing, I would sneak into their house to retrieve my belongings. My husband's relentless attempts to contact me went unanswered as I ignored them completely. One day, while packing my things at his parents' house, I thought I had a couple of hours before they would return. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Kate, is that you?" I jumped, startled to find my father-in-law standing there. He wasn't supposed to be back so early. Our honeymoon was supposed to last until today. My presence there was unexpected, and I struggled to come up with an explanation. Should I tell him the truth about why I returned to New York? But what if he was involved in the plan with my husband? As I was on the verge of panicking, my father-in-law suggested, "How about we go somewhere else to talk, like a nearby cafe?" To my surprise, he made this offer, likely because his wife would be returning soon. I agreed, and we headed to the cafe. "Why are you here in the middle of your honeymoon? Is Ewan back?" he asked once we were seated. I hesitated, unsure whether he was involved in their scheme. If he was, revealing my plan for revenge would be futile. "Didn't your wife mention anything to you?" I asked cautiously. After a moment of thought, he replied, "She hasn't said a word to me." His expression suggested genuine confusion. Relieved, I decided to explain everything. "Do you know about this plan?" I handed him the printed messages between my husband and his mother. His eyes widened as he read them. "I've seen them talking together a few times, but I had no idea they were plotting something like this," he admitted. It was clear he was genuinely unaware of their scheme. I told him how I had overheard my husband's conversation with his mother in Italy, which led me to discover their plan. The shock drove me to return to New York alone. "I see. I'm deeply sorry that my wife was involved in something like this," he said. "There's no need to apologize, father-in-law. It's not your fault," I reassured him. "As for the future, I'm truly sorry, but I'm considering ending my marriage with Yuan." "That's your decision, Kate. I want you to make the choice that's right for you." "I'm at a loss for words about all this," he said. Afterwards, my father-in-law continued to apologize. Up until now, I had only sensed a distant atmosphere from him and worried that he might not think well of me. But seeing his genuine concern and sincerity, I began to believe this was his true nature. I couldn't reconcile how someone as kind-hearted as my father-in-law could have such a problematic wife and son. As I pondered this, he shared an incident with me. "Kate, did my wife ask you for money to buy luxury brand items?" he asked. "Yes, she did," I admitted. "It might be partly my fault." "How so?" he asked. "When we were newlyweds, I gave her an expensive designer bag for her birthday. Since then, she seemed obsessed with branded goods. I wish she'd choose items more appropriate for her age," he explained. "I didn't realize she even borrowed money to buy them. I got really angry with her for that, and I thought she had understood. I never imagined she would try to get money from you. I must have underestimated her." He bowed his head in apology. I had never understood my mother-in-law's obsession with branded items. But even if that was a factor, I couldn't forgive her actions. "It's not your fault, father-in-law," I said. "She continued her behavior even after you warned her. It's her own issue." "That's comforting to hear," he replied. "By the way, where's Yuan? Didn't he come back with you?" I hesitated. How would he react if he knew his son was stranded abroad? I had to be honest now. The truth is, I took Ewan's passport with me, so he might not be able to return for a while, I confessed. I know it was a drastic move, but it was the only way to ensure no one interfered with my preparations. My father-in-law looked shocked at first, but then he chuckled. I see. Given the situation, it might have been unavoidable. That's why he said that. Wait, what did he say? I asked. Well, I overheard my wife talking to Ewan on the phone on the day you returned to New York. Ewan seemed a bit flustered by your absence but mentioned that it might actually make our plan work. At that moment, I didn't understand, but now it makes sense, he said. If that's the case, I'll support you too. That would be very helpful, I said. As we chatted, catching up on everything that had happened so far, my smartphone rang unexpectedly. It was Ewan. He must have realized his passport was missing while preparing to return home and decided to call. I answered the call. Hello. Kate, finally, you picked up. Where are you? I've been worried sick because I couldn't reach you. I'm glad to hear you're okay, Ewan said, his voice filled with concern. I'm relieved you're okay too, I replied. I'm sorry. The truth is, I received an urgent message from my parents and had to return to New York immediately, I explained. I was so rushed that I didn't have time to contact you. I see, Ewan said, but do you know where my passport is? Actually, because I had to leave in such a hurry, I accidentally took your passport with me, I admitted. What am I supposed to do now? Ewan asked, sounding frustrated. If it's alright with you, I think it would be faster for you to get your passport reissued there rather than waiting for me to send it, I suggested. Reissue it, Ewan said, exasperated. You know I can't take any more time off from work. I'll contact your workplace and explain the situation, I assured him. I'll also inform my in-laws. I'll handle it from here. Okay, I trust you. I'm truly sorry for the trouble. Please take care and come back safely, Ewan said. I ended the call and took a deep breath. My quick thinking had helped manage the situation. Thanks to my father-in-law's assistance, the process of moving our belongings and handling the divorce proceedings went smoothly. The day finally came for my husband to return. His passport had been reissued without issue, and he came home with my mother-in-law who had picked him up from the airport. I'm back, Ewan announced. I didn't expect such a mess at the end. Really, it's Kate's fault. She needs to be more careful. My mother-in-law, having heard the story from Ewan, grumbled in annoyance. Perhaps she was displeased because my early return had disrupted some of her plans. While I had my own grievances to address, I kept my focus on the upcoming situation, considering these matters trivial in comparison. When Ewan and my mother-in-law arrived, my father-in-law, with a stern look on his face, said, Sorry to bother you right after you got home, but come here. He then led them to the living room. Please have a seat, I said, motioning to my husband and mother-in-law. They looked slightly startled, but complied and sat down quietly. I fixed my gaze on them and began, You must be tired from the trip, but there's something important we need to discuss. Important? My husband asked, his confusion evident. What are you talking about? I'll get straight to the point, I said, my voice steady. Ewan, I want a divorce. What? A divorce? Ewan blinked rapidly, clearly taken aback. Kate, what are you talking about? You left our son in Italy, and now you want a divorce just as you're back? This is incomprehensible and thoughtless. Thoughtless? I retorted. Isn't that what you two are being? What did you say? My mother-in-law exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. Do you really have no awareness? What is this supposed to mean? Can you please explain? I handed her a printout of a messaging app screen. This is a conversation between you and my husband, discussing your outrageous plans. What's this? Anyone could fake something like this, she scoffed. Plans and evidence don't mean anything if they're made up. If this alone isn't enough, I said, placing a voice recorder on the table. How about this? I pressed play, and the recorded conversation began. The recording clearly captured my husband and mother-in-law discussing how their plans were thwarted by my unexpected return to New York and their subsequent disappointment. I managed to record this thanks to my father-in-law, I explained. My mother-in-law is hard of hearing and always uses speaker mode, making her calls loud and clear. My father-in-law took the initiative to record their conversation. This should be hard to argue against, don't you think? Wait a minute, Ewan said, his voice tense. Kate, it's not like that. Please just wait. I just acted out of necessity for my mother, Ewan said, his voice earnest. I never really wanted any of this. But she said she needed money for luxury items, and I couldn't bear to see her sad. Now I realize I don't want a divorce. Let's leave this house and start a new life together, just the two of us. How about that? I sighed deeply, struggling to keep my frustration in check. What kind of thought process leads to such optimism? I asked. You should really stop calling her mom all the time. It doesn't sit well with me. I appreciate your care for your mother, but plotting to get rid of your wife for insurance money to buy her gifts is beyond comprehension. Living with someone like that? No way. Just the thought gives me a headache. Ewan seemed unprepared for my response and was at a loss for words. I'm going to divorce you no matter what, I continued firmly. I'll be demanding the division of property from both of you and also asking for reimbursement for the luxury items I bought for your mother in the past. But if you do that, I won't be able to buy any more bags or watches, my mother-in-law interjected, still fixated on her luxury goods. Her obsession left me speechless. Enough was enough. Suddenly, my father-in-law shouted, all you think about is yourself. Have you ever considered how much pain Kate has been through? Are the luxury items you crave so desperately worth someone else's suffering? Do you even understand the emotional burden you've placed on her? His words struck a chord and silenced them. While his outburst lightened my mood slightly, I wasn't finished yet. Ewan, when did you find out? I asked. On the first night of our honeymoon, he replied, looking down. I overheard you talking to your mother in the middle of the night. That's when I found out, so I returned to New York the next morning. My husband seemed to realize something at that moment. You didn't tell the company about this, did you? Who knows, I replied, but I think we'll find out soon enough. As if on cue, Ewan's cell phone rang. You've got to be kidding me, I said. The call was from his company. Hesitating, Ewan answered, oh, yes. What? Fired? Wait a minute, but before he could explain, the call ended. I've already submitted evidence regarding this matter to your company, I said. With the loss of both his job and his marriage, Ewan crumbled to the floor, unable to come to terms with reality. From now on, any communication will go through my lawyer. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Thus, our brief marriage ended abruptly. However, the story didn't end there. My lawyer advised me to report their actions to the police as their plan constituted illegal activity. I followed the advice, and while they weren't arrested, they did face fines. My husband struggled to find new employment, and my mother-in-law faced criticism from the community. To cover the damages and other costs, she had to sell most of her luxury possessions. The only item she kept was a bag given to her by my father-in-law on her birthday. Now, my father-in-law controls the family finances, and my mother-in-law's spending is severely restricted. They've certainly learned a valuable lesson. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying my single life in a city apartment. Though my marriage ended soon after it began, I don't feel lonely or sad. On the contrary, I feel refreshed and liberated from that household. If I ever decide to marry again, I'm done with living with in-laws. Living alone has its challenges, but the freedom to live without catering to others is truly liberating. Now that I'm free from my mother-in-law's financial demands, both mentally and financially, I've started saving again. My hope is to share happy times with someone special in the future. That's my wish.